Good afternoon on what is a bright sunny day. It is Friday the 18th of March, back in the room with some parcels, this big one which I've already been into, and of course a nice hot cup of tea. And so let's continue delving into this one. So packaging, pull out the dice I've already looked at, basically John Carter of Mars dice, which I got along with the card decks, and that one, and this one package. I've already looked at that. So into the one below. This, so let's adjust the package so that's it's a bit easier, give me some space. Move that out of the way. Yeah, what fun this is. So what have I looked at so far? It's this, which is Conan, the Monolith Sourcebook. So let's open this up and find out what is inside. Plastic. So this is a supplement for Robert E. Howard's Conan Adventures in an Age Undreamed of from Modiphius Entertainment, which is one of the first 2D20 system role-playing games. And I've been looking at these various supplements, and this is another one on the list, which is based on the hit board game and the award-winning role-playing game. So this is a combination of the role-playing game and the board game. Consider what I've told you, Barbarian, said Zaltoton. You will have plenty of leisure. I've not yet decided what I shall do with you. It depends on circumstances yet unborn. But let this be impressed upon you, that if I decide to use you in my game, it will be better to submit without resistance than to suffer my wrath. Since the introduction of fantasy into wargaming, Robert E. Howard's Conan has loomed large across popular culture, recently inspiring the award-winning Robert E. Howard's Conan Adventures in an Age Undreamed of role-playing game, and Monolith's hit Conan board game. So that was funded by a very big Kickstarter. Here, for the first time ever, the crossover between those two games, miniatures and role-playing adventure, meet in the Hyperion Age. Developed closely with Monolith Entertainment, the Monolith Sourcebook provides players and game masters with a host of exciting materials, new campaigns for both games, standalone adventures, and advice for creating original board game adventures using the role-playing sources. So essentially, what you can do is use this to interact with the other. So essentially, the Conan board game can interact with Robert E. Howard's Conan Adventure in an Age Undreamed of, and vice versa. So Red Tide Kush, a complete board game campaign with 10 new scenarios. Rules for solo and cooperative play for the board game. A solo cooperative campaign made up of 9 new scenarios for the board game. Guidelines for using Conan tiles and role-playing resources to create new scenarios for the board game. Shadows of Gold Sagath, a complete role-playing adventure campaign set in the legendary Black Coast. Characters, monsters, equipment, and the artifacts from Bola the Spearman to Zuthal's Crown. Get the most out of Conan's board game with this essential sourcebook. Requires 2 Conan tile sets, Perilous Ruins and Forgotten Cities, and Forbidden Places and Pits of Horror to play. The Conan board game, King's Pledge for tabletop action, and and of course the role-playing game. So really, if you have one but not the other, this isn't quite as useful as other Conan supplements. And the likelihood is that if you've got the board game, it's going to be easier to get this and the role-playing game than if you've just got the role-playing game and this and you want the board game. Since it went very quickly out of print, and having even tracked down to see whether it's actually available would be interesting. I'd be interested given that I've been looking at all the Conan content, I'd be interested to see what it's like. So what we've got, we have a map of the area of the Western Sea and the Black Coast. Before we get into the contents and describing what the Monolith campaign sourcebook is, and the board game campaign. So I mean, obviously I've not played the board game, so I really can't comment too much upon this. You know, let's be upfront about that. Essentially, this hybrid campaign essentially uses the contents of the Conan board game King's Pledge set, okay, for 5 of the adventures, and then the other 5, they will need the role-playing tile sets. So the crossover there, it's encouraging you sort of like to sort of like get into it, but I'm sure if you're an enterprise, I mean, probably more so than for the role-playing game necessarily than for the board game. But if you're an enterprising game master, you could use this as inspiration for your campaign. You don't have to use you could work it so you don't have to use the tile sets. Best played with the tile sets, but if you want to play Theatre of the Mind, I'm sure you could work at it. So here we've got essentially a guide to using the setup and using the Conan tile sets before we get into the first encounter. So blasphemers from the past. So you can see here's how it's set up in the board game, and you know, opening prompt, winning the game, setup, special rules, and so on. So 2 or 3 pages devoted to that, and just going to do the same for Bridge of Death. And as much as anything, these are more sort of like separate encounters as such, rather than role-playing sort of scenarios in the traditional sense. Because they're focusing on sort of like face-to-face combat. You know, so you've got the forces of the player characters being ambushed by or surrounded by the enemy, and so on. But I mean, each one is different, so there's lots of invention there, and a chance to really get into the board game and play more. So it's nice that you do get that expansion to the board game, but again, it does need that sort of like that buy-in of extra content. So you've still got these great illustrations, though. I'll just show you that a bit closer. It's really nice. So that's the first 5 of the encounters. Then we get Death on the Tide, and so we've got a nice nautical encounter. You know, probably that would go well with something like Conan the Pirate. And then we've got something similar as well with you know, again using that earlier map. When we get into sort of like a castle under siege situation, switch to rougher terrain for that one, and holding off an attack on Fort Tuscan. So that could possibly play 2 ways. So essentially, you might think, you know, player characters defending it and then having to attack it. That would be, you know, there's some flexibility there as well. Of course, another great illustration of Conan himself, I presume. And then the role-playing adventure. So this is obviously, you know, switch to the role-playing. It's much more text heavy and focused, and really designed basically used in conjunction with the board game. And there's quite a lot going on, but it's not to see necessarily. You've got to, but you do have. There's the option not to play. Here, there's background here. Here, if you've not played through the board game, so The Lost Son of Jebel Sag. For those who do not play through the board game campaign, the following offers a backstory to the contents of the adventure herein. So that's quite lengthy. So that's a page, and in fact, it's 2 pages long. So there's a lot of background to go through to set up the scenario, but it's using some of the same locations. And then it's got so that's actually in comparison to the board games really sort of take up this amount of space. So in the book, so let's have a look. That is 36. That's about 30 pages for the board game campaign. The role-playing campaign, much shorter, runs to let's just see, to really just about 12 pages. We've got options for solo and cooperative play. Expanding the use of the the style in the style of play in the board game. We've got more rules there. Now, of course, I would actually love to we would be looking at this. I hadn't really have a great deal of interest in getting the board game. I would be interested in looking at it and giving a proper review if I could get hold of it. But that's another hurdle to overcome. And then we've got a full campaign, basically beginning with the lost scrawlings of Skelios. And again, we can see some of the similarities in terms of the maps, the tile maps used. And these are all great when you bring them out, because they give us sort of like a physicality to your game and presence, and whether you're using them as the board game or of course the role-playing game. So we have, again, as I say, similar locations used throughout, and I mean that's different. We've got like a tavern, it's a Lotus House, so we know what that's used for. You can guess what that's used for. Great artwork again, really in keeping the vein of Conan and the sword and sorcery genre. At Core of the Fens, again a wetter, damper fitted location. All the way up to Halls of the Scarlet Citadel. So that's 8 parts to that campaign. And then scenario creation, and we've got rules in here for creating scenarios, who's involved, and bringing them, basically creating them for the board game. So for example, aim for fun, steps for design. So choose a concept or objective, choose a map, and so on, and go through the steps to create a scenario that will be interesting and fun to play. And then we've got a scenario spotlight, bringing the dead to life. There's a guide to how to do it. So lots of options, and then how to use the Conan tile packs and creating solo and cooperative content. And then artifacts and antagonists from the source material. And these, a bit of a mix for both the board game and the role-playing game. So so you've got dark demons and a princess minion or Teflon, stuff like that. Fairly generic in to be honest, but also you've got the Suthax as a nemesis. So that's not generic, but I mean the other ones are. And then rounding out the second, but we've got that really nice there. So that's the Monolith Sourcebook. So nothing about a monolith, but basically it's the Monolith board game of Conan, and how to combine the two and cross over. I think that's a nice idea. It's really one for players and game masters who are fans of both rather than one or the other. There's interesting content, I'm sure, in there for both. Basically, but if you have both, yeah, this is probably a good source book. Anyway, thank you for watching another unboxing in the Nook. If you've enjoyed this, then please do click that like button down below, and we've got your comments or feedback. I appreciate you taking the time to post those. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to yet more unboxings in the Nook, where you'll see me out here with a box and a book or game, which I will unbox and chat about to the best extent of my knowledge, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea, or so on for roughly 10 minutes, then please do click that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching, and I'll be back again soon with another unboxing in the Nook. Bye for now.